All right, let's go ahead and get started here. Hi, everyone. Sabrina from BeSmartee here. Thank you for joining us today. Tim, our CEO, who you've just met, will be leading the discussion on the future of the modern digital mortgage and mortgage innovations you would like to see. A couple of quick things. Please make sure that your live button under your name is highlighted red. This will just ensure that we're able to hear you throughout the session. And also, this will be a recorded session. So with that, I'll pass it over to Tim.
Well, guys, thanks for everybody for joining. Today's topic is going to be what is the future of digital mortgage? What does that look like to you? What are the top 5 innovations or changes that are required to accomplish that vision? We'll make it a free-for-all, so to speak. I'll go through and we'll talk to each individual person, give everyone a chance to contribute to the conversation. And if anything good comes up, we'll bring that and raise it to the top. So really, this is our conversation. Think of it like just having coffee. And Jim, would you like to start?
Yeah, sure. I really think that, the thing that I would like to see somewhere down the road here is the ability to have underwriting more standardized and kind of change the process of kind of ending the bottleneck, if you will, of when loans start the process, depending on who you're going through. Underwriting is everything. And it just seems to me that we really don't have a standardized way of doing it, which kind of prevents us from really taking the next step of truly digitizing the origination process.
And when you talk about standardizing, are you talking about more technology or more of a blueprint that will take into account different lenders' risk appetites and portfolio profiles?
Well, I think it's both, right? I think one feeds into the other. I think if they came up with more of a solid blueprint, then the technology would follow that would allow it to happen. But I do think that, that seems to be in the origination process where things just hit the wall at the underwriting stage.
Gotcha. Thank you, Jim. Yeah. What do you think? What do you think the future of mortgages looks like, and the innovations required to get there?
So, we've had some discussions at this conference about this, right? Really about how do you shrink that cycle time? How do you make it easy for customers? How do you shrink that cycle time? How do you get them to close almost as fast as possible? And you've seen a lot of that, a lot of the discussions around there. The one area that I would really like to see more of, and candidly, I'm going to admit this, right? I would really like to understand more is AI. And I know we had earlier discussions also about this, right? But to me, that discussion really was more about how do you use technology to solve problems? How do you use RPA to speed up manual tasks? What I'm really hoping for is this concept of really machine learning to drive better decision making, fraud checks, really improving the customer experience so that it's customized for the customer. How that works, what that is, I'll admit I do not know. But I get the sense that if things are really going to change and things are going to revolutionize, that is one area where it's going to come from.
It's interesting. When we launched our product in 2016, we introduced the concept of machine learning. And one of the things that struck me was lenders had a very difficult time embracing the fact that they did not know how that data was derived. How do you think the banking industry would react to AI at scale? Not knowing how that data actually came about, how the decision was actually made.
I think there is more and more comfort with, conceptually how AI works. I think as long as people know that the data is theirs, then how you manipulate it is fine. I think that they'll probably have greater issues with the sharing of that data. If they're anything like HSBC that have huge issues with sharing of data. But I think eventually I guess my concern is less about how the decisions are made. The issue would be less about how the decisions are made, just because conceptually I think there is more awareness of how AI works. Good.
Very good, thank you. So thus far, Jim and Yao talked about back-end efficiencies contributing to a more modern digital mortgage. John, what's your take on this?
I think it's going to be, I mean, a nod to you guys, like guys like BeSmartee here that are going to be driving the efficiency of the marketplace. I mean, at the end of the day, I think it's you guys that are going to be sitting there and say, okay, we have a process and we own, in essence, the consumer experience, albeit for many banks type of thing. It's how do you guys leverage AI and create those experiences for the consumer? To be honest with you, I don't think, like, I would agree. I don't know if the banks have 1,001 different problems, right? Like, BeSmartee, like your place on the earth was to help the consumer through the process.
Yeah, I'll throw my hat into this conversation as well. So, when we look at the future of digital mortgages, one component in light of working from home and COVID has come up is online collaboration. We have it, we're experiencing it now. There's Skype, there's Slack, there's phone calls and GoToMeetings and whatnot. But they're not always enterprise level, right? A lot of firewall issues. It's not linked and embedded into the mortgage process itself. Right, whether you want maybe a consumer wants to talk to their loan officers and see their loan officer and have that level of trust and certainty. Or it could be a internal processor who needs to talk to the loan officer of record. The data should show and flow right on that. Not let's schedule a GoToMeeting. Let's hop on. What loan number are you talking about again? Spend 10 minutes before you can get to the crux of the issue. So that's one direction that we're starting to work on, is taking these collaboration tools and wrapping it inside an ecosystem where it's linked to the loan data, loan behavior, loan actions itself. What do you guys think about that? If we could make that conversation, the remote, better, where do you see impact? How does that impact digital mortgages in your eyes?
It sounds fantastic. I mean, I would think that people would, embrace the ease of use, right? I mean, the whole concept of the iPhone, people went off on it because ease of use, right? You put it all there and it was easy to use, and it didn't, all of a sudden, you got 2-year-olds that can sit there and play on iPhones, and off and running they go. So I think the key, to that process is just from the user side. If you could make it easier for me, obviously, the more embracing of that process I'm going to be.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that. Oh, John.
Sorry, go ahead. No, I would absolutely agree. So I work in the insurance industry, and everything about our world is to make an application easy for the consumer, right? So one of like a pain point, for example, is like, what's the VIN of your car? I can't tell you. I don't want to go out there and look, like all those different things, but it's required to get a quote. So it's the automation of partnering with a third party that like has that information, where now all of a sudden, okay, like if you were to go to progressive.com and do a quote, for example, like literally it's actually kind of scary. They will pull up the cars in your house and say, hey, which one of these are your cars? And you select from the list and say, boom, that's the car, we got the VIN, and then you can proceed, and just removing that barrier is ultimately the key to getting the throughput through the system. Interesting.
That is fascinating. I didn't know you guys were doing that at Progressive. I didn't realize, but I want to bring Katie into this conversation as well. Katie, in case you missed it earlier, the topic is, what does the future of digital mortgage look like? And what are the top 5 innovations, changes, modifications that we need to see as an industry to get there?
Hi. So I was kind of over here like, oh, are they going to call on me? But I'm kind of just here to learn and listen. I work for an AI machine learning digital identity company. So I'm trying to kind of get a better understanding of the market and our product market fit, and just learn, what digital innovation means in mortgages. So I don't know if I have a ton to contribute at this point in time. So I'm, just kind of trying, to better understand the concepts around this. So if that's okay.
Absolutely, absolutely. This, yeah, it looks like you got something to say there.
Yeah, I'll just return to your concept of collaboration, right? We do have a philosophy where we try and keep customer-facing employees in the same system with the customer. And so really the philosophy is a single system, single point of truth that anyone in that front office uses. And the reason for that is simple, right? We want, from the customer's perspective, it's ease of use. From a loan office perspective, you really want to drive adoption, right? You don't want them fumbling around with systems. Are we good at it? Not really. We still have a ways to go. And so, and collaboration is one of those tools, right? It does sit outside most POSs, so anything you can bring in and drive loan officers to and processes too is helpful.
Awesome. Jim or John, anything else or Katie, anything else to share on the topic of collaboration as a positive effect on the future of digital mortgages?
Well, no, I mean, oh, go ahead. Sorry, Jim.
No, go ahead, John. Go ahead.
No, I'm actually, it's interesting to even see in the world of the digital mortgage, like the collaboration between the LOS and the point of sale system and kind of the blending of that integration too. Where maybe it becomes, I don't know if it'll ever become one single system because it is so, the end user is so different, but it's pretty interesting on the data that you can get back and forth and the collaboration that those systems go.
Very good.
Yeah. And I also think it's important that, the bigger the companies are, then they turn to get components and plug into their existing system and not necessarily try to develop the entire process, but to be able to take, components from one company and another company and bring them all together and kind of allow, at least from the user perspective, they can get multiple functions out of the one channel as opposed to having to, jump from one to the other and to the other. So, I think companies collaborating together that all have these data streams that can bring this together and make it easier on the user is going to generate more activity from the users from the start.
Yeah, I like the direction of this. One thing I picked up earlier was, Jim, you actually mentioned about, the data access, with the examples for the insurance and John as well. What are the critical data elements that we're missing in able to aggregate to either expedite, reduce the cycle times, like Yao mentioned, or simply provide better experience or even more certainty in the underwriting standards that you're after, Jim?
Well, I mean, I from an insurance perspective, it's a little challenging because, and I think John can attest to this. There's so many little components that go into determining, insurance, either eligibility or pricing. Down to the type of pets you have, the type of, do you have a trampoline in your backyard? So, I mean, there are things that, probably can't be done up front, but I will say that, there are, if you really wanted to flow this through, I mean, getting some additional questions put in at the appraisal point would allow almost all of that data to go seamlessly from the application, the contract on the property, and the appraisal. You'd be probably 3 or 4 or 5 questions away from a consumer to be able to give them a quote on the spot.
No, and home insurance is moving that way. I mean, look at entries into the market like a HIPAA, where you can take a couple questions and do that. It is, I think, on the insurance side, in terms of speeding up the process, I think it's delivering that quote to the consumer at the right time, at the right place with the information done. And then, again, I think it's closing out the loan file and delivering back that EOI, which I think is challenging because it's literally just paperwork that the consumer has to call us for. Like, we don't want to deal with it, right? Because it's just phone time for us to send them a piece of paper. But, the banks need it to close out the loan, right? So it's everybody needs it, no one wants to get it type of situation.
Yeah, what's your perspective on the missing data components? And in particular, how does HSBC use data? You guys have so much rich data, whether it's deposits, whether it's a mortgage. How do you aggregate that data and bring it in to really streamline the digital mortgage experience?
With a great challenge. I will say this, right? Within the mortgage space itself, we do tend to look at what we call transactional data, right? So what data a customer provides. But then there's another stream of data, which is behavioral data, right? Which is what is the customer doing? And we tend to, we're good on the transaction data because from a compliance perspective, we have to be. We're a bit less good on what the customer is doing. And then where I think we're not very good at is merging those two types of data elements together, right? Because then through that, you should actually be able to get some degree of predictive analytics to say customers who these kinds of transaction statistics tend to operate in this kind of fashion. So we haven't got there yet. But that's generally how we think of data within the mortgage space. Within the bank-wide space, it's challenging. We have multiple systems. We admittedly have a patchwork of systems. We do feed them into core systems. We try and report out of core systems, but then you need specialized folk to do that. And it's hard sometimes for an end user like myself to be able to pull it as and when I need it. So it's that I think would be the more larger administrative issue when we're talking about all of bank data.
On this topic, I'll throw my hat into the conversation as well. We see the challenges that Yao mentioned from, a huge bank internationally, data in different pockets of the organization. And the rest of us are talking about data from outside of the organization that's housed with different vendors. Then you go to another layer deeper, which is site data, right? Data from the consumer, data from the things you have to physically be there to see and touch or trust from a conversation. That really complicates things. It reminds me of what we're going through right now with Neurala. I'm sure everyone here is going through in some respect. A standard has been created. We've had years to work on it and collaborate on it, and yet, as we're finishing off the final touches on earlier, what we see is, both major GSEs have different interpretation of the data a little bit. The doc providers have different interpretation of the data. Do you guys think that, we can ever get to a point where the data could truly be standardized, whether for internal communication or, external communication?
That's a tough nut to crack right there.
Yeah, that's about as good as world peace, man.
So.
All right.
That's a tough one.
So what else do you guys got in mind? What else do we have to do as an industry? What do we get better at? Does it have to be technology? It could be processes, could even be regulation. Where do we need to be looking?
Well, go ahead, yeah.
Good. You can go ahead, Jim.
I think what we need to also maybe take a peek at is if you look at how the mortgage industry, which, has always been a dinosaur, from a technology perspective, it's always been way behind a lot of the other industries. But if you look at what's transpired over the last 5 years, and then now what's transpiring today, just based on this pandemic, nobody wanted to talk about e-signings and e-closings. It was a fringe topic. It was out there. People were kind of looking at it, but everybody was scared to death. And then all of a sudden, boom, this thing got thrown in. You can't be in front of each other. And you're seeing states just across the country, just boom, embracing it, taking it in and making it happen. I really think the industry here is now in a situation where you're not going to be able to get toothpaste back in the tube. And people are going to kind of look at things going forward and say, I want to be able to have a call like this and be able to close my loan. I want to be able to just do something like this instead of having to go into the branch and talk to people or just talk to, whoever picks up the phone, on my refi. I think people now have figured out that it can be done, even though it's dispersed, it can be brought back central again. And I really think over the next year or so, it's going to be, we undid all of this stuff that used to be like rules could never be broken, and we broke them all in like an hour. And now trying to figure out which ones do we keep and which ones do we try to go back in time on. Maybe we do, maybe we don't. But I really think it's all about what did we unleash, and how do we then harness that and move it forward?
John?
Yeah, I would agree. I mean, you're going to even see it. I think this, if this pandemic caused anything, it caused everybody to rethink how they do business. Like, we, at Progressive, we were tight for space in terms of people, at the offices, and now it's like, well, we could actually work from home, and we had work from home policies, all that good stuff, but it's like, well, why don't we do this more? It seems to be better. Or like, do we really need to fly? I mean, even our president said, he goes, why are we flying out to go have a meeting? A day of travel to go have a 1-hour meeting. He goes, why can't we do it on Teams or Zoom or whatever it might be, and just increase the efficiency of the total organization? So, I think there's a lot of, now that it's, like you said, Jim, out of the bottle, there's some good opportunities, I think, will come of it.
Yeah, no, I mean, I agree. Things have changed so much. I personally hope that we don't go back in the bottle. And if anything, I just hope that the momentum continues. It does create a very challenging competitive environment for us, because it means we have to embrace change a lot faster than we are used to. But I think it's much better for customers and much better for the businesses as well.
Yeah, that's all real good stuff. I can tell you at our organization, for example, we were moving to a work from home posture anyways. COVID obviously expedited that, kept our infrastructure people busy hardening laptops and going through that whole process. But, the majority of our employees do not want to come back. And we've actually noticed an increase in productivity and happiness. It wasn't like that in the beginning. Some people wanted to be inside the office. Right now, people are saving an hour and a half off their drive time. They're using that time to do other things more productive in their lives. Now, as we take that and relate it back to the digital mortgage industry, I think it kind of boils down to what we opened up with was collaboration and communication. Whether it's employee to employee or borrower to lender, that communication really is critical, right? We're never gonna get away from that. And if we can't get away from it, right, we're starting to see, this leads into e-close. Ron, it's funny how, a true remote online notary jump right through the origination process, jump right through the processing process, and jump right to the closing process, right? What do you guys see as the future of pulling that type of mechanism earlier into the funnel? Where, if I need to talk to my teller or my banker or my loan officer at HSBC, I just hit a button on my computer and we're having a conversation instantly.
Yeah, I would say that's the future. I mean, that's, I think, where it's the on-demand communication, right? Like, I'm available now, I'd like to talk to somebody, and then having that availability to say, like, hey, I want to buy a home. How do I get pre-approved, right? Like, not waiting till the next day or a week later, getting passed through 3 mortgage officers, whatever it might be. Like, it's, we are in a instant gratification society, right? So how do we make those experiences instant?
Yeah, and I think it's an evolution, right? I mean, you guys are young. Believe it or not, phones used to be used to talk with, right? I mean, when cell phones first came out, they were actually phones. And, but what it did was, starting with that cell phone, it evolved into texting. And now texting kind of became the new norm. And I think you're right, Tim. It's, today we're still using phones and we're using emails, but now the whole world got cascaded into the environment we're sitting in right now. And I think you're absolutely right. It's going to move and it's going to shift. And the leaders are always the guys who are out in front, right? Who said, hey, we kind of thought this could work. We just didn't want to try it. But I think that's the future is I'm going to hit a button and that person is going to pop up on the screen and I'm going to start talking to them about what I need to talk to them about.
It's funny, the more digital we become, the more we want to see each other and collaborate together once again, right? It's human nature to want to know the people and players behind the scenes and talk to someone and reach out, albeit virtually. So that's the theme I keep hearing, communication and communication. What do you guys think? One thing I'll throw into the hat as well is communication between the POS and OS. I think, John, you mentioned that earlier, if that could ever become one, or should it even become one, right? Yeah, what do you see at HSBC? Is that a struggle to get that POS experience data synced up with the LOS?
It's challenging. I think if it's pre-integrated, it helps, but even then, it's never perfectly synced up. It goes back to my philosophy of really one system, right? We want one system, and we break that a lot as a result. And with that, we break, I think, really putting our best foot forward to the customer. We also break, I think, what I would call utilization. So one metric we do look at is how often our POS is used, because that's really what drives cost savings as well as speed. And sometimes, we hear from loan officers, well, I can't do that in the POS, right? I can't do this specific task in the POS, so I have to go to the LOS. And I'm like, well, then we've lost an opportunity as a result. So we really do want to. I would say it's a challenge that's present for us, and we continuously try to resolve or to mitigate.
Yeah, we see the same challenge as well. Some LSS are going to be have more channels of communication, so to speak, right? More opportunity to make that better. Jim and John, what do you guys see on the insurance side, getting that data to and from the LS and even the POS for that matter?
Well, I mean, for us, the way our company's designed, and John, we work with you. I represent young Alfred, and we write through Progressive. From our perspective, we built direct integrations into the carriers that we represent, and we do a data capture that feeds directly through. So we're kind of there from that perspective. We are a conduit, if you will, but it is taking data from our perspective. The application has to theoretically fit 40 carriers, and then once it comes down and we process that, we can determine in our estimation what's the best opportunity for the consumer. But that information does all flow straight through from the app into the agency who ends up writing the policy in the end. So we're kind of there a little bit.
Yeah, and I would agree. I think the challenge in insurance is insurance has to change, not the mortgage industry. So insurance is a player in this marketplace, not the driver of the marketplace. So I think, and you're seeing it with, products that are what we like in the insurance, in the carrier side, we call like quick quotes, right? So, hey, what are the 5 pieces of information? We can deliver a bindable rate. And then we ultimately use third-party data or the product's designed to do those. I don't want to say ignore those dumb questions, but like, do you own a Chihuahua? Like that question is ignored. Like it's just priced into the product, I guess you could say. So you don't have to ask that question every time, or do you have a trampoline or whatever it might be. And then you go from there, because, ultimately in insurance, like, yes, every rating variable in insurance is powerful, or at least the ones they ask are powerful, or more data is more power. But there's like a balance that needs to be kind of struck, especially with home insurance, right? Where it's like, okay, do we need to ask 47,000 questions, or can we get by with these 10 type of thing?
Gotcha. Sabrina, I'm not sure if you're on. I'm just kind of curious how much more time we have, but let me change the topic until that day. So you're coming.
Hi, Tim. I'm here. We actually are a little bit over, but that's okay. We're still recording if you want to continue. Otherwise, you can feel free to close it out.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I want to be respectful of everyone's time, but if I could just ask one last question in one different way, so we go around the table. You need a drop. Don't feel bad. Totally understand it. What in terms of a future of digital mortgage, what it actually looks like, what's not going to happen? Let's close out by looking at from that reverse perspective.
Oh, I could give you. It's not going to be the Amazon one-click buy. Like, I mean, I think it's a goal, but I don't think that'll ever happen.
Regulation, technology constraint. What's a blocker?
Yep. I think it's. I actually don't even think it's regulation. I think you guys in the mortgage industry has the same issues that insurance has, where it's like you are loaning on a pretty large asset, so you want to make sure that you're protected, right? So it's like you need the questions, like, you know, insurance can get by if there's a trampoline or not. And honestly, if you went out and bought a policy and the next day you bought a trampoline, we wouldn't know, type of thing. So like, but on a home that's, home values just keep it going up. Like, I think it's almost impossible to get to that point where it's one click. Too much risk.
Yeah, my comment's going to be very similar, but I don't think you'll ever get rid of the loan officer. There'll always be somebody in there, and it may not be that you even meet the person or even see the person and know what he looks like, but what's the right word to use? Like the comfort of knowing that there's somebody guiding you through that process. That I think people need.
Yeah. Questions. You always are going to have questions. Like, you got to have someone available.
Jim, what's not part of the future of digital mortgages?
There's certain things that can be done to an automation, and then there's just certain things that, like, I agree from a loan officer perspective, but I mean, I think you can lean away from that a little bit with automation to a degree, but I really think that, the fact that you have first-time home buyers, that's the one that you just can't get past the fully automation on. If someone's purchased a home before, they get it. They understand the process. It's like, having your second child. The first one you go in and, you're ready to, anything that happens, it's like, whoa, was that supposed to happen? By the second or third, it's like, just give it to me when you're done. Right?
Yeah.
And so I think, from a digital perspective, it's getting past the first time through. That will always be the challenge, to just completely taking humans out of it and taking that relationship out of it. But after the first time, I think it can be converted very simply to a fully automated process.
Any final thoughts before we conclude, gentlemen?
Yeah.
No, this is great.
Great discussion.
Yeah.
Wonderful. So first off, I want to thank everyone for joining. The topic today was, again, what does the future of digital mortgages look like? And the top 5 changes, innovations, modifications, whether regulatory, technologically, or people have to change as well. That has to happen in order for us to make this process as digital, as efficient, and as beautiful as possible, and give people a good experience when they go through this ride with their lending institution. With that said, we'll go ahead and conclude, and thank you very much.
Thanks, everybody.
Everyone.
Nice speaking with you.